Council help and prosper its work for the advancement and benefit of its people, so that peace and happiness, unity and justice may be established among us all. Amen.
Amen.
Manningham Council acknowledges the Wurundjeri people as the traditional custodians of the land we now know as Manningham. We pay our respects to Wurundjeri elders past and present and value the ongoing contribution to the cultural heritage of Manningham. Council would also like to acknowledge the contribution made to Manningham over the years by people of diverse backgrounds and cultures. I welcome all members of the public here tonight to this council meeting who have come along to observe proceedings. I would like to advise those present that tonight's meeting is being audio and video recorded. All care will be taken to maintain your privacy. However, as a visitor in the public gallery, your presence may be recorded. By remaining in the gallery, it is assumed your consent is given in the event that your voice or image is broadcast. All council meetings are governed by meeting procedure local law. I will introduce each item of business as listed on the agenda, calling it by number and reading the title. I will then call for a mover and seconder of a motion on the item before opening any debate. Only councillors who are able to join the debate on an item. Councillors may adopt the officer's recommendation in the report or propose amendments and supplementary motions. I would like to draw your attention to item 7 on tonight's agenda, public question time, which provides people with an opportunity to ask questions of the council. Questions must be registered prior to the commencement of the meeting to be asked. If we do not have the information at hand to provide a meaningful response to the question, it will be taken on notice and a response provided in writing. I would also stress that I will deal with a maximum of 2 questions per person and only 2 questions on any one issue. If you have more than 2 questions, please submit these additional questions to council in writing through the normal channels. Item 2, apologies and requests for leave of absence. An apology has been received for this evening's meeting from Councillor Goff. Item 3, prior notification of conflict of interest. We have one prior notification of conflict has been received from Councillor Conlon for item 9.1. Item 4, confirmation of minutes. Do I have a mover? It's Councillor Conlon.
Yes, I'd like to move that the minutes of the ordinary meeting of Council held on 22nd of October 2019 and the annual meeting of Council held on 7th of November 2019 be confirmed.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Kleiner. I'll put the motion. Those for? Against? Carried. Item 5, presentations. There are no presentations. Item 6, petitions. There are no petitions. Item 7, public question time. We have received a request from Mr. Barry Watson. Mr. Watson, I'm assuming you're in the chamber. Welcome. We're pleased to have you here. Would you please come forward to the microphone? Mr. Watson, you have 2 minutes to make a brief introductory statement before asking your question. Please.
Right, thank you for this opportunity. In Manningham Matters, we've got 4 full-page articles about how Council are dealing with the issues relating to North East Link. There's nothing mentioned about air quality and the pollution. Manningham Matters mentions many issues affecting community health impacted by NEL. However, it completely ignores the air quality pollution, the health impact of 80,000 cars, extra 80,000 cars and 15,000 trucks. I've met with our CEO and Mayor and discussed this issue. It still remains off the agenda. I've mentioned that no proper study of the State Environment Protection Policy, SEP, compliance for particle pollution was done in the EES. I've also corresponded with our CEO but received no proposed action to protect residents' respiratory health. At a meeting I organised with the EPA on the 14th of the 11th, 2019, Professor Vicky Kotsaliris, AM, did a presentation to the EPA describing the serious negative health impacts that will occur along the NEL route. Nothing was challenged by the EPA. There are 11 kindergartens plus schools, plus aged care facilities, plus sporting precincts. She stated that young children and aged persons are most prone to heart-lung damage from particles, PM10, PM2.5, and nitrogen dioxide gas from vehicles. There is no safe limit. Does the council support dumping 80,000 vehicles plus 15,000 trucks outside 11 kindergartens when no proper SEP, PM10 or 2.5 health study has been done?
Thank you for your question. As this question relates to North East Link project, could I ask the Director of City Planning and Community, Mr Columbus, to respond?
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and through you, Mr Watson, thank you for your question. Look, I'm conscious that there's been a number of different contacts and correspondence with yourself about this matter, including, as you've mentioned, you've met with the Mayor and our CEO. You've also met with our legal representatives at the EES.
I had a discussion by phone.
Yep.
And it was not very fruitful.
As you've been advised previously, Council has advocated for a redesign of the North East Link, in particular to make it narrower, especially the Eastern Freeway section I'm referring to reduce the impacts on the environment and on the abutting residents and other land uses that you've mentioned. And that includes noise and air quality impacts.
No, you've never mentioned air quality.
Could please.
Yeah. Okay, but
just let him answer.
that's not quite right.
We can't make it a debate.
In our submission to the EES, we also noted that there are proposed environmental performance requirements in the proposed approvals for that North East Link that will deal with or mitigate the impacts that you've described. And finally, all 4 councils that were directly affected by that are directly affected by this project presented a consolidated closing submission to the EES hearing. It reinforced the evidence raised by all the councils and all their collective experts, including the air quality experts.
No, Manningham didn't. The other 3 did. Dr. Cowan
I'm sorry, Mr Watson.
was the rep.
So again, I repeat, we provided a consolidated combined closing submission to reinforce all the points to the EES panel. And finally, Mr Watson, I also acknowledge and note that you've actually written and made a verbal submission to that hearing, and as you said, you've met with the EPA about your concerns. Council has put in a very comprehensive submission to that process, but the final decision now is with the Minister for Planning.
Council did nothing with air quality. You keep dodging. You keep dodging the air quality.
Thank you, Mr Watson. If you'd like to, Mr CEO.
No, I'm happy to just reinforce what Mr Karamba said, and that was that there are a range of different consultants and expert opinions, as you would be well aware, that presented on a whole range of different topics. As far as the 4 councils that are predominantly affected, we were very, very clear in our closing submission that we supported each other's professional opinions that were put forward. So in terms of what you're talking about in terms of the other 3 councils, our council was very clear that we supported the elements that were put forward, just as those councils supported a number of the submissions that were put forward by the professionals and the consultants that we brought together to provide evidence.
Well, the question I'm asking tonight is State Environment Protection Policy, which is there to set limits and protect people's health, has been ignored. And Andrew, I've met with you and we've discussed it.
I'm sorry.
What's happening? What are you doing?
You don't get an opportunity to control the question time.
Well, I'm not getting an answer.
Mr Watson, this is a public meeting of council. If you don't follow my directions, it is not a good thing. And I'd really appreciate it if you just respect the process and the conduct of council so that we can provide the answer that we have to you. I appreciate you may not agree with the answer and you're entitled to that view, but we can't have this turn into a public debate. The bottom line for us as a council is that we did not support option A. The government made the decision to implement option A. The impacts from that will come from the design that they choose. We have made very extensive and exhaustive submissions to the panel about our concerns with the design. But we do not get to change the government's decision, and we do not author the Environmental Act that this is auspiced under. In the end, we are all in the position of accepting whatever decision the government makes. You, us, all of the citizens of our city.
Accepting.
Well, thank you for your time.
Yeah,
We
thank
have
you.
answered your question extensively, and we do appreciate you exercising this opportunity. That's what it's here for.
Thank you.
Right. Item 8, admission of urgent business. There are no items of urgent business. Let's go to item 9, planning permit applications. 9.1, planning application PL19-0086 at 5864 Hall Road, Warrandyte South, for demolition works and the use and development of the land, including buildings and works, for a secondary college, Year 9 campus of Donvale Christian College, and vegetation removal. Do I have a mover? Sorry, before I do that, I have to deal with one other matter.
Mayor, thank
Councillor
you.
Conlon.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, I wish to disclose that I have a conflict of interest in this item, the interest being an indirect interest due to financial matters, and I'll be leaving the meeting room for the duration of this matter and enjoying a cup of tea.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have a mover of a motion? Councillor Galbally.
I would like to move the alternate motion to be adopted, the alternate motion 1 to be adopted.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Kleiner. So, for those of you in the public gallery, I'm assuming you have the papers that you picked up on your way in, and you should have a copy of the alternate motion number 1 available to you. Yep. Councillor Galbally.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. This planning permit that's ahead of us is for, as we all know, it's for a school to provide Year 9 students from the Donvale Christian College, outdoor ed, and it's a total of about 168 children. I mean, exactly, up to 168 children. What we know is that this is a rural conservation zone area. It has permitted use, is a school, and the history of this site is that it has been a primary school until it was closed by the Kennett government in the 1990s. Since then, it's been a youth training school. And what we also know is it's still a permitted use for this site to accommodate a school, as well as other things like a hotel and maybe even a broiler farm. So I think with the options that we've got in front of us, we actually have the opportunity here as councillors to ensure that this permit is to the standards that we would accommodate and that we would consider. We've got an opportunity here to sort of help the local residents achieve their concerns about traffic issues and the fact that the idea of having a school might bring to their environment. The main problem I see with the whole issue is that it is a private school. It is a private bus that will be travelling with their children to and from. So my suggestion here is that the bus parking bay be moved on site to the school. That is one of the major changes to this planning permit. The other ones is about the traffic along Hall Road, that after we've had extensive traffic management, our engineers will have a look at it. It's number 25, if those have got the alternate motion, that we will be looking at speed calming measures that are installed on Hall Road, Kendall Road and Coleman Road if it deems necessary after it's been investigated by council engineers. And these costs will also see a contribution from the school up to $30,000 to help assist council deliver that. And the other changes to the transport would be outside the community hall or the scout hall, which is council property, that currently in the plan it's showing that it was the parking bay for the bus. That will, what I'm suggesting here is that it could be a built-up platform where it would stop people wanting to just stop off and drop off their kids, and it'll have a curbside, and it'll make it a more accessible area for the Scout Hall. And also the same sort of treatment with a bit of a curbside on the opposite side. So we're not just relying on no standing parking signs to be in the vicinity of the entrance to the school, but we'll also sort of work on the sides of the roads to ensure that there is no place for cars to drop off. So all drop-offs will have to be within the compound of the school, including most definitely the buses. So with this, I hope that you would all see to approve it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kleiner.
Nothing to.
Do we have any other speakers? Do I have any speakers against the motion? Any others?
I have some questions before I
Councillor Haynes.
decide. I do like these changes, Councillor Galbally, and I'm certain that on your own you didn't just come up with these, so thank you. But I still have a number of concerns. One of them is, are we looking at putting in, if this goes ahead, there's nowhere within this motion or anything else that I see, I could be wrong, to do with supervised school crossings, because I don't think it's just the parking issue, it's also when children are dropped off or walking. So are we looking at any supervised school crossings so that the students know if they are crossing the road where to cross, instead of just willy-nilly crossing when they feel like it, as we know Year 9 and students tend to do?
Thank you, Councillor. I'll direct that question to the Director of City Planning and Community, Mr. Columbus.
Through you, Mr Mayor. No, look, that's correct. There isn't a provision or a condition in that. Parking will be prohibited, as the councillor said, on the other side, and it's not sort of an environment for significant walking to school.
Okay, thank you for that answer. And also, one of the other questions, I just heard about curb and channel. I'm just wondering about footpaths for walking conditions that you said it's not conducive for, but yet students will need to be walking even if they're dropped further down the road. So I don't think everyone's going to be dropped off at the same time out front of the school, just in my practicality. So I'm just wondering, is there going to be footpaths provided?
Thank you, Councillor.
No, there won't be, Mr Mayor. Not proposed.
Okay, I am aware that.
Other than in the immediate vicinity of the school. Yep.
Okay. Mr Mayor, with all the other issues that I find, and including the great changes to this motion, I am going to speak against it, just based on the situations with some of the issues that it still does not address, even though it does address most of them. So there are going to be students wanting to do bikes and things, and I'm very aware that it's very possible. As I'm speaking, I'm probably going to speaking against it, because I do know that it's highly probable that this would get through without all these conditions if it did go to VCAT, unfortunately, but that's not for me to say. I'm also very much aware that this has the ability to cause a lot of stress for every resident around the area, for students that are bored in that don't live in the area. And so I do encourage that some councillors really consider also voting against this motion, because I don't think this does address many of the needs that are needed for the width of the road and for the traffic that will be there, and for the safety of these students, just even with the school crossing, in my view, not to mention all the other things that are on my mind. So without having anything further to say, because there has been some really good changes to this, I don't support this motion.
Thank you, councillor.
Thank you.
Do I have any other speakers for the motion? Any other speakers to the motion at all? In that case, I will put the motion. Those for? Against? That's carried. Item 10, City Planning and Community. But before we go ahead with that, ladies and gentlemen, please do not feel you need to sit here for the next 10 minutes. Please feel perfectly free to stand, leave the meeting. We appreciate this meeting. I appreciate this meeting could go for another 45 minutes to an hour before we get through the rest of the agenda, but you are welcome to stay and join us. Okay. Item 10.1, Community Facilities Access and Concession Policy. Do I have a mover? Councillor Piccinini.
I move that the recommendation be adopted.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Chen. Councillor Piccinini.
Mr Mayor, we're asked to adopt the proposed community facility access and concession policy that is before us. This policy came to us in a draft form some months ago, and it's had some community consultation, and it's now before us in an amended form. It relates to the hire and lease of our community facilities. So council owns about 200 properties, and many of these properties are sporting pavilions, club rooms, neighbourhood houses, community kinders and the like. And presently we have several policies and guidelines covering the use of these facilities and hire of the same by our community. So what's being proposed tonight is that we adopt one single, consistent and transparent policy that will govern all our properties and all of our community groups that wish to hire them or lease them. The approach in this policy is that our properties will be assessed at its market price for lease or hire, but then discounts will be applied to different types of community groups, and there's about 5 categories of community groups within the policy. And the discounts range from 0 to 25% right up to 100%. like my submission is that that this is a fair and equitable and open and transparent policy that we should adopt. Now, overall, the community feedback to this policy has been quite positive. There is one criticism that's been made, and that is that it's been difficult for some of the community groups to assess its fairness, given that there was no schedule of fees attached to the policy. So now, in response to that, the policy will be introduced slowly over time, because there's a number of groups that have long-term leases over some of the facilities, and so obviously they won't be subject to the policy until those leases expire, which could be a number of years. And also, it will be a gradual process with consultation with our community as the policy is introduced, and the fees and charges, they'll be determined also over time in future budgets. So on that basis, I'm seeking that we as a council adopt this single, equitable, transparent policy for our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Chen.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, and Councillor Piccinini has made very, very comprehensive submission, and which is really, really nice. And I really just want to add one more thing about the discretion that we are going to we can exercise by the CEO and the directors themselves. And we all know that it is a common feature of rules in law and everywhere that they are subject to exemptions. And there was no such provision in our first draft, and I'm glad to see that it has then been included. So we ensure that the flexibility is always there to address some special circumstances. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have a speaker against the motion? Any other speakers for?
I actually have a question.
Certainly, Councillor.
And perhaps I'll just preface that by asking for some clarification. So in regard to the fees that the clubs or users will be actually charged, my understanding is that it'll go through our normal budget approval process, which means that it'll be proposed in a draft budget. The public will then have an opportunity to make submissions to that budget and will consequently adjust or approve that budget. And that is the process, because there are some clubs that are concerned about the fees. What does this actually mean in terms of a dollar term? And that's my understanding. And so that's my point of my question.
I'll direct that question to the Director of City Planning and Community.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. That's correct. It'll be considered as part of the annual budget process and the fees and charges.
Okay, thank you.
Nothing further.
Are there any other speakers to the motion? I'll put the motion. Those for? Against? Carried. Item 10.2, the Doncaster Hill Vehicle Movement and Parking Study and Open Space and Community Amenity Study. Do I have a mover? Councillor Chen.
Mr. Mayor, I move that the recommendation be adopted with the following addition. Note that Note that officers will continue to engage with the residents in Precinct 2 with specific interest in this study to discuss the outcomes of the study and ensure the concerns around Precinct 2 are understood and are able to be incorporated into future actions and planning.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Haynes. Councillor Chen.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. At the May 2019 Council meeting, a supplementary motion was passed. The motion requested a new vehicle movement, parking study, open space and community amenity study on south of Doncaster Road and east of Tran Road, which is Precinct 2 within Doncaster Hill. Council then appointed GTA consultants to undertake a traffic and parking study within the Doncaster Hill Activity Centre and in particular within Precinct 2. The report is attached in this agenda. The consultants examined the traffic pattern based on forecast land use, including the Westview expansion and transport network assumption, and found that there are no significant changes in traffic movement along Doncaster Road, Williamson's Road, and Tran Road. But there is a slight increase in traffic on local roads as a result of the adjacent higher density developments. The increases are considered to be so-called strategically minimal. Therefore, the consultants suggested that the current proposed Doncaster Hill Development Contribution Plan transport items remain unchanged. Many of the identified non-completed DCP projects are long-term projects. The affected residents are expecting a new report with measures to address the adverse impacts in Precinct 2. I'm very aware of their frustrations. And Council, but we just want to ensure the residents that Council will continue to engage with concerned residents to understand their concerns and incorporate their concerns into future actions and planning. The report also found that a majority of actions identified in Doncaster Hill Strategy and Manningham Open Space Strategy are complete or in progress. For example, Council has purchased Herburn Road properties for future open space development. 10 days ago, Council held a very successful community park design consultation event at Herburn Road. There is a minor upgrade to Walker Reserve, and new footpaths have been installed in Walker Street, Guildford Road, Gilmore Road, and Arthur Street. Council is currently reviewing the Doncaster Hill strategy to guide development over the next 20 years. Council will further address traffic, transport, parking, open space, community facility in both Precinct 2 and the whole Doncaster Hill. No doubt the report will assist the current review of the Doncaster Hill strategy. I wish to take this opportunity to also urge our community to get involved in shaping our city's future and let Council know your aspirations for our city. You can provide your feedback by visiting yoursaymanihan.com.au. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Haynes.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. There's not really much more to add because I totally support everything that Councillor Chen has said, except to say on some of these pages of these this report, I thank the officers for such an in-depth report. It's interesting because there's even a map for a strategy for 2050 within it for possible scopes and things that are happening. So I'm very happy that this supplementary motion was put up by Councillor Gough, and that there's also been the addition that even though this report is quite comprehensive and the reviews and the information in it are informative, I have a feeling that some of it is already out of date as we speak. And I'm thankful that we are going to have continued engagement with residents within the precinct. Now, Precinct 2 basically means the area between the freeway up to Doncaster Road, from Elgar Road right through to up here at Whitton's Lane. So I'm grateful that that is a whole area that's constantly under review, and there isn't a day that goes by that I don't get a call from people within that area with their concerns of traffic and parking and many issues. There's also something that's been brought up to do with the widening of Tram Road, the possible widening of Tram Road that Vic Roads are looking at doing, because that's not our road. And I'm hoping that we continue to get some outcomes for Tram Road, including a U-turn and some other issues. So as this is just a movement and parking study, there's no point in going forward in a discussion right now with issues that are going to be brought up around our briefings and things. But I am thankful for this report and for that to be something that we continue to discuss at the table week in, week out, coming forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have any other a speaker against the motion? Do I have any speakers for the motion?
Neutral.
Councillor Zafiropoulos?
I think the topic has been covered. However, I'm a little bit puzzled that the report has been based on the past and what we know, but it hasn't incorporated major initiatives which will exacerbate what we call strategically minimal impact. And I'm referring to two things. The Westfield expansion will have a great impact and it's not incorporated. Bunnings is another development that will also have a great impact in this area. And I think it's important that we keep that study constantly reviewed to incorporate elements that are making things worse for the residents. Whilst it might appear to be tolerable up to this point, my view is that this area is making it easier for the rest of us, for the rest of the city, to be able to sustain their current amenity, and therefore we need to be very sensitive in any negative impact that this area is incurring. So.
Thank you, councillor. Do I have any other speakers to the motion? I'll therefore put the motion. Those for? Against? That's carried. Item 11, City Services. 11.1, King Street residents petition for parking bays. Do I have a mover? Councillor Haynes.
I move the recommendation be adopted.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Kleiner. Councillor Haynes.
It's the response from officers regarding the King Street residents' petition that came forward some time ago, and it's quite a detailed response, so I want to thank the officers for putting that work in. And the recommendation that Council advises is that they are, where feasible, the design and construction of indented parking bays may be undertaken at residents' costs in accordance with the council policy, and that council advises that the King Street petitioners and residents were fully consulted during the King Street design, which was quite intensive for a number of years, and I chaired over that most of the time, and all the councillors that were to do with both wards were able to come to those meetings each time. So I'm thankful for the engineers that have done. It's interesting that, as we know, the history of King Street was that we ended up, over lots of consultation with Vic Roads, doing what they call road swap with Vic Roads, and they got one that we'd already spent the money and work on, and the residents of King Street thought, well, finally they're going to get what they wanted, and with the topography and the issues, it's been quite difficult to bring it all to fruition, and I'm thankful that we now have good walking and footpaths that are also quite wide for the many students that use that to get themselves to school, and also now there's aged care facilities and other facilities around the area. So I'm thankful that we do have what we've got there, and that council's done a good job. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. Councillor Klein. Nothing to add. Do I have any speakers against the motion? Any other speakers to the motion at all? I'll put the motion. Those for? Against? That's carried. 11.2, police loan vehicle. Do I have a mover? Councillor Haynes.
I move that the recommendation be adopted.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Galbally. Councillor Haynes.
Just quickly, this is just councillors. I hope you support this totally, because it's to endorse the extension of the memorandum of understanding with Victoria, the Doncaster Police Station, to agree for a loan agreement for the further 5-year period. And as we've been supporting this. This is quite an historical thing over many, many years, and the support that we get from the police and the work that we do with them, and even with the free community barbecues and everything else at Doncaster. And there's a lot of police stations that don't do that, so I'm really grateful for our wonderful relationship with Vic Police, and I hope that you support this. But just also to add, one of our local police officers, Elizabeth Sideropoulos, just won a multicultural award for her work here within the Eastern region and within our area, so we're really lucky to have her as well. So anyway, just support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gobley.
Nothing to add.
Do I have any speakers against the motion? Any other speakers of the motion at all? I'll put the motion. Those for? Against? Carried. Item 12, shared services. There are no shared services reports, so we'll move to item 13, Chief Executive Officer. 13.1, Strategic Risk Register Report to Council, 6th monthly report, October 2019. Do I have a mover? Councillor Piccinini.
I move that the recommendation be adopted.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Zafiropoulos. Councillor Piccinini.
Yes, Mr Mayor, we're asked as a council to note the Strategic Risk Register 6 monthly review. So as a council, we've got roughly 740 staff and over 100 different services. So it's very important for an organisation like this to have a very rigorous and systematic approach to risk, and we do have that here at Manningham. And the register that is before us is the Strategic Risk Register, which is a very high-level risk register. I would like to note that our Risk Management Committee has done a lot of work on this register in recent times, and they've actually undertaken a review, and as the method that we use to assess and monitor the major primary influences to our strategic risk, and that piece of work is detailed in this report. And it's very thorough and it's very useful for us in determining what our strategic risks are, of which we have 13. These risks are monitored by this committee that I've mentioned, but also the Independent Audit and Risk Committee. And many of them have been or are subject to internal audits so that we can better understand these risks. And in the report, councillors will note that we do have one new strategic risk, and that is the impact of the North East Link project and what impact that might have on council's ability to, in this term, fulfil its commitments to our 4-year council plan. And that's an obvious strategic risk, because when you have Victoria's biggest infrastructure project going through your municipality, that may significantly or impact on the plan that as a council we have for our municipality. A 7-year construction program may impact on our ability to fulfil our council plan, particularly in relation to the area of Bulleen. So this new risk has been put on our strategic risk register, and it's being monitored by officers, by councillors, and also by our independent auditors. So I asked the councillors to note this register. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Zafiropoulos.
Nothing really to add. I think Councillor Piccinini explained the significance of risk management in any organisation, and having a rigorous look at the risks makes it easier for an organisation to anticipate and then respond to risks that might be catastrophic in some cases. It's good to know that our major risk list includes about 13 risks, if I know it correctly, and I think there were 4 high risks, and after taking some measures, there's only 2 now. The rest are medium risks, which is really good management. That's all I really need.
Thank you, councillor. Do I have any other speakers for the motion? I'll put the motion. Those for? Against? That's carried. Item 13.2, Manningham Quarterly Report, Quarter 1, July to September 2019-20. Do I have a mover for this matter? Councillor Zafiropoulos.
I move that the recommendation be adopted.
Thank you, councillor. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Chen. Councillor Zafiropoulos.
It's pleasing once again, Mr Mayor and councillors, that our first quarter reporting again continues that process of continuous improvement. This reporting is mandatory because of the Local Government Act, but it also helps council and councillors and the administration to keep an eye on our performance in relation to key performance indicators that we have designated. So it's a good thing to keep on looking at things. Picking up some of the performance in relation to this quarter, we had 34 projects have been completed, a further 84 started and 75 are progressing well. The other thing is any projects that were transferred from the last financial year are well advanced into practical completion. Overall, the project summary shows 45% renewal, 35% new, 15 upgrade, and 5 expansion for the quarter. The financial issues are also very important in relation to reporting, and we're almost hit the budget. I think we're just under $100,000, which is insignificant. The important thing is that we continue to make significant progress in relation to the number of applications we complete within 60 days. If there was an indicator that made that council look bad in the whole of local government in Victoria, it was this indicator. And over the last 12 months or so, we continued to make improvements. And not only have we reduced, we have increased the number of applications that are dealt with in the 60 days, we'll also reduce the time as well. The other thing is overall, council is on track with initiatives, all initiatives, and also within target to deliver 92.8% of the council plan. So this is extremely, what's the word, extremely welcome. And I'd like to congratulate the administration for an excellent piece of work. Quarter 1 indicates that the other 3 quarters will be just as good. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. Councillor Chen.
Nothing to add, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Do I have any other speakers for the motion? Councillor Piccinini.
I'd just like to say that there has been a new initiative on these quarterly reports, and we now have our CEO's quarterly expenses published as well as the councillors. So that's a great initiative in terms of being open and transparent as a council, and I commend the council for that initiative.
Thank you, councillor. Do we have any other speakers? I'll put the motion. Those for? Against? That is carried. Item 13.3, review of council's election period policy. Do I have a mover? Councillor Conlon.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move that the recommendation be adopted.
Thank you, councillor. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Galbally. Councillor Conlon.
Thank you. Well, this is something that we have to do as part of the Local Government Act, and it basically defines a caretaker period. But I'd actually like to point out that despite it being reviewed after the last legislation change in 2015, our fantastic officers have managed to find 10 major changes and a whole lot of minor ones. So I congratulate them for their due diligence in this matter, and I appreciate that as a result, anyone running for the election who sits around this table won't be breaking the law, hopefully, if they read this policy. So I commend the policy to you.
Thank you, councillor. Reading and complying with it being the two key things.
We hope none of us do.
Do I have... Are we going to hear from you, councillor?
Oh, no.
Do we have any other speakers to the motion? In that case, I will put the motion. Those for. Against, that is carried. Item 13.4, council meeting schedule for 2020. Do I have a mover? Councillor Kleinert.
That the recommendation be adopted.
Thank you, councillor. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Piccinini. Councillor Kleinert.
I'll keep it short and sharp, just like me. If we don't pass this, there's no meetings next year. It's very simple.
Oh, I'd like to pass that motion.
Thank you, councillor. Do I have any other speakers for the motion? In that case, I will put the motion. Those for. Against, that's carried unanimously. Item 13.5, record of assembly of councillors. Do I have a mover? Councillor Chen.
Mr. Mayor, I move that the recommendation be adopted.
Thank you, councillor. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Zafiropoulos. Councillor Chen. Thank you, councillor. Councillor Zafiropoulos. Thank you. In that case, I'll put the motion. Those for? Against? That is carried. Item 13.6, documents for sealing. Do I have a mover? Councillor Conlon.
Thank you. I would like to move that the recommendation be adopted with the addition of the following agreement. Consent to build over an easement agreement under section 173 of the Planning and Environment Act 1987. Council and C. Fan and L. Lee of 9 Belinda Crescent, Doncaster East.
Thank you, councillor. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Piccinini. I'll put the motion. Those for? Against? That is carried. Item 14, urgent business. There are no items of urgent business. Item 15, councillor question time. Do we have any questions, councillors?
I might have a question, if I can.
Certainly, councillor.
Well, my question is about advocacy for better bus services. And Manningham Council is a member of Eastern Transport Coalition and Metropolitan Transport Forum. And their advocacy priority is buses. And as an ETC Council rep in the last 3 years and NTF and executive since last year, I can see some success of their advocacy work. So Manningham is indirectly benefit from their success. But on a local level, I really think that we need to run our own bus advocacy campaign that tailored for Manningham. And the campaign should not be part of the road or transport advocacy works. A better bus network and reliable services could provide travel alternative and for residents, especially for our seniors and students. And it could reduce social isolation and loneliness, and it's good for our environment.
Thank you, councillor. They're all good things, but
Can I ask that what is our advocacy plan for better bus services in Manningham, please?
Thank you, councillor. Mr. CEO.
Thank you for the question, councillor. And certainly this council has had advocacy, particularly over the last 12 to 18 months in relation to a range of different projects high on the priority list. As you rightly point out, we are active participants in a number of existing regional groups, including the ETC, and that's certainly formed a part of our and council's advocacy over a number of years now. As you'd also be aware, with the suburban rail loop and also the North East link, advocacy in relation to council's position on buses has been a key part of that, and certainly pushing wherever we possibly can council's desires in relation to its existing bus transport strategy. We've also been seeking meetings with the relevant ministers in relation to transport, and particularly the Minister for transport in relation to specific advocacy around buses, and we'll continue to pursue that. I'm not sure if the Director would like to add anything to that.
I agree, Mr Mayor, that there will be a further briefing of councillors. Yep, coming up soon.
In the near future? Great, thank you. Do we have any other questions? Councillor Haynes.
Thank you. Just following up from Mr Watson's question, I have a question regarding noise and air quality pollution. I personally have extreme concerns, not only for the people that he's mentioned, but also the thousands along that Eastern Freeway. We've been doing great advocacy, and I do like our Manningham Matters. And as always, there's never enough room with all the different issues to publicise. So I can see the frustration that many have. But the widening of the Eastern Freeway isn't getting as much noise as the issues that we have on the other side through the Koonung ward people that are going to be deeply affected. So I'm going to ask, is it possible that our council do further advocacy with specifically on the matter of the noise and air pollution along those kindergartens and all those homes, not only the aged, but also people like mine and others that are going to be detrimentally affected, almost gravely. I think extreme concerns can even be said. I don't know it's going to be catastrophic, but I don't plan on growing old, getting sicker than I need to be. And I'm certain that everyone along that freeway and that are there on our side.
I think we have the question.
My question is, can we extend our advocacy further through council, and would I need to put a motion up in the following month as we start to how we can get that going, and could I work with officers to put that forward?
Mr CEO.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Haynes. So as you'd be aware, the environmental effects statement report is currently with the Minister for the Environment. We are waiting for his view on that report, as is the state government, and that's imminent. So we're hoping, we understand that will come over the next couple of weeks, if not earlier. My recommendation would be that we wait to see what is in that report in terms of the impacts on that corridor, particularly in relation to that element, but also all of the elements. I'd also recommend that members of the community get online and read in detail the submissions that occurred in relation to that. And I think it's important to reinforce that council advocated and put positions on a number of these items through the EES panel process. So once we have that information, we'll obviously talk to councillors and broadcast that to the community, and that'll inform any future advocacy.
Oh, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Mr CEO. Do we have any other questions? Thank you, councillors. Item 16, confidential reports. We have a motion before us that council close the meeting pursuant to section 89.2.A of the Local Government Act to consider item 16.1, the CEO Performance Review 2018-2019 concerning personal matters. This motion will result in the meeting being closed to the public. Do we have a mover for this particular motion? Councillor Galbally.
Yeah, I move that the council close the meeting to the public pursuant to section 89.2A of the Local Government Act 89 to consider item 16.1 CEO Performance Review 2018-2019 concerning personal matters, as you read.
Personnel matters, yes. Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Piccinini. I'll put that motion. Those for? Against? Carried. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. The meeting will be closed for a few minutes.